Okay, we have next the South Island Target Shooting Association by video conference with Val Wadsworth.
Hi there.
Oh, hello, Val. My name is Deborah Russell. I'm the chair of the Finance and Expenditure Committee. We have 10 minutes with you now to hear your submission on behalf of the South Island Target Shooting Association.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just allow the video to come a bit closer. Okay, I've been involved in the sport of small bore rifle shooting for over 50 years, starting at a small country club here in Marlborough when I was still at primary school. I enjoy and I'm passionate about my sport, and I've represented New Zealand both in New Zealand and overseas. One of the things about small bore rifle shooting, it's arguably the most inclusive and equal sport in New Zealand, one in which men and women, short and tall people, old and young, compete in the same matches in the same grades together. The New Zealand Junior Under-21 team recently, and also the Inter-Secondary Schools New Zealand team in the last couple of months, each of those teams included 8 young women in the 12-person teams, just an example of the inclusiveness of the sport. As coach of the local girls' college team for the last 25 years, I've been proud to see the girls come through, girls who not necessarily would excel in other sports, maybe not fast enough or big enough, but they've gone on and become good competitive target shooters, and some of them have represented New Zealand. Government is supposed to promote equality in all fields, but here is a very equal sport which is actually being penalised, for reasons which I'll tell later, by the actions of someone who had probably never belonged to a club like ours. And why wouldn't that person belong? Well, small bore target shooting is the most conservative, most boring form of shooting sport available. It's like watching the proverbial paint dry. We don't attract the macho types who like loud noises and lots of action. They come along, they try it, and they go away because it's not what they want. Our sport's disciplined, demanding, and it's got a strong safety ethic. Small bore rifle clubs have been operating throughout New Zealand for over 90 years without incident, and yet apparently suddenly the system is broken. Most of our members had no issues with the first round of legislation. It's not our way of shooting semi-automatics. All of our rifles are single shot, .22 caliber target rifles, meaning each round must be individually loaded and fired by hand. This latest round of legislation is quite different, with wide-ranging consequences for all of our small bore indoor clubs. The financial impact of registration and inspection fees on small clubs will probably cause closure of half of our South Island clubs. We've got 597 registered shooters spread across 67 clubs from Tasman to Tokanui. Average club membership therefore is 9. The median is 7, and we have 22 clubs who have 5 members or less. These clubs are just unable to absorb the cost of what looks likely to be an unnecessarily expensive registration process. These small clubs are part of their communities. They've got small membership, but they provide an activity for the wider community, just like the local bowls club, who they probably share the hall. They host young farmers, schools and scout groups on their ranges and serve a valuable purpose in familiarising people with learning about firearms in a safe and controlled environment. They've been operating for decades without issues. Their closure will just be another kick in the guts for rural New Zealand by politicians with no knowledge of target shooting sports. Only in the bigger towns will clubs have the size and ability to absorb the costs and regulations that they must do. The proposed legislation includes significant duplication of effort with that of Target Shooting Act New Zealand, our parent body, which has its own respecters and an ongoing process of range certification already. We're concerned that the police safety template, which is based on their expectation of their shooter and firearms ability, will be used on our ranges. It's likely to differ markedly. Civilian target shooting sports have got a very high level of accuracy. For most new shooters, the initial goal is to shoot a score of 90 or above. It's roughly equivalent to keeping 10 shots inside the size of a 20-cent coin at 20 yards. All clubs already supply various returns to target shooting in New Zealand, and it should be a relatively simple matter to expand this to include the police on the circulation list. Firearms registration. Unlike firearms registration, who use their firearms occasionally, many of our members are competing several times a week throughout the winter season, 6-month season, at different ranges. This means the location of their firearm changes frequently, from home to their vehicle to the range, back into the vehicle, back home. If the process is as suggested in the legislation takes place, people are going to be forever logging into some form of computer system, as yet uninvented and untried, to change their firearm location. And the same with parts. There are many removable parts on target firearms. We have backup parts, spares. To keep track of all these things, especially the small ones, is ludicrous. Now, just by way of example, I have here with me, I took all of these, I didn't take the mouse off. I took all of these parts of my target rifle this morning. We've got the foresight, the rear sight, butt plate, cheek piece, and the hand stop. They're all vitally necessary for target shooting. That rifle still fires. They are not necessary for the rifle to be used in the wrong sense, but I can't use it as a target rifle anymore. In theory, I would have to register each of these ones separately because I own 3 foresights, I own 2 rear sights, I own 2 butt plates, I own 2 hand stops, and I change them as necessary. Obtaining one of these parts is not going to help even the most technically capable criminal to build a firearm from scratch. He's not really going to pick this up and say, oh look, I can now build a rifle. It's just like stealing a wing mirror to build a car. Ownership of and responsibility for club rifles is also another major issue for clubs. Somehow these will need to be listed under the licence of multiple club members, as one person can't be responsible for all the rifles on the range when they are being used by multiple non-licensed members. So we have a system where people look after other people. We just heard the gentleman from Canada. Registration has been spectacular and costly failure in other countries. It has been proposed here again in a much more complicated format. In closing, this proposed legislation appears to have been drafted in haste and ignorance, without waiting for the findings of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the March 15th tragedy. Proposed legislation is based on the police impact assessment, which makes many incorrect assumptions. It was drafted without consultation with specialised shooting sports such as ourselves. Not surprisingly, both have serious shortcomings. And like the first round of legislation, there's bound to be other consequences not yet identified. The legislation is likely to be divisive and starting to polarise the shooting community. Moderates in the shooting community are starting to become more polarised because of the actions of the legislation drafters and police, and it's going to cause loss of goodwill with firearms licence owners. We oppose the proposed legislation in its current form, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, look, thank you for that submission. I think you're the first person who said, come and join my sport, it's boring, but it's really intrigued. So we do have a question from...
I think he said it's a small bore.
Yeah, small bore. David.
Could I just clarify? These are very low caliber firearms that have a magazine capacity of 1. They hold a single shot, and you're now going to be required to register up to 6 different parts, even though the sights and the butt stocks are not essential to the firing at all. It seems to me it's like a basketballer having to register their sweatbands. Very much so.
In fact, if I get the factory screw that holds the front sight unit on my rifle, which is about 5 millimetres long, if I buy it from Germany, I have to go through lots of import hoops to get it. I can go down to the local machine shop and buy the same screw.
And if that part was found on your property without you having registered it, you could be up for 10 grand or 5 years.
That's my interpretation of the rules. The devil will be in the detail, of course.
Sounds nuts to me.
Okay, members, do we have any further questions for Val?
Very comprehensive.
No, thank you it was an excellent submission.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you putting the submission in and making the time to do it, and for demonstrating with the parts from your firearm today. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.